Now, Ethiopian journalist and blogger Eskinder Nega has been jailed 8 times by the Ethiopian government on convictions of treason and terrorism. In 2012, Eskinder was sentenced to 18 years in prison after being charged with inciting the public during speeches he made calling on Ethiopians to continue with their peaceful struggle for freedom. On February 14th, he was unconditionally released as part of a presidential pardon after serving 6 years in prison. Eskinder joins me in the studio to discuss his prison ordeal as well as press freedom in Ethiopia. Eskinder, a very warm welcome to you to Africa 54.
All right, thank you for having me.
Now, let's start with your experience in jail. How were you handled?
Well, this is an African prison, so you could guess how it would be. But overall, I think the objective of the imprisonment was more than physical imprisonment. The objective is to break the spirit, and that was not specifically against me, but against all prisoners, particularly political prisoners. And in the final analysis, it did not happen. That's why I'm sitting here. My spirit is still there.
But what we hear of people in jail being physically tortured. Did you experience any of that?
Not this time.
Were you isolated? Were you?
I was in isolation cell, but this time no torture specifically against me, but against my friends. Like you said, I was in prison 8 times, and during those times, there were times when I was tortured. So there is torture in Ethiopia's prisons.
How has that changed you psychologically?
All right, let me start from where I am now at the present moment. I'm completely and 100% committed to forgiveness. I don't want to look, towards our past. I think we should be geared to, we should be fixated and be looking towards the future. And it hasn't, there hasn't been a negative impact against me specifically. And I think against, even against most other prisoners. I think most of us are fixated on the future, not the past.
So since your release, how has your life been? Have you been able to continue with calling for freedom and reforms in Ethiopia?
Yes, I have. Not because the government wants me to speak, but whether the government wants me to speak or not, I will continue to speak on behalf of democracy, on behalf of nonviolence, on behalf of reconciliation, because I think this is what we need in Ethiopia. In particular, I think we need to bring the South African model to Ethiopia. This is, like I said, we don't need to look back towards the past. We need to be fixated on the future, and the way forward is the South African method.
Do you have any fears at all of being rearrested?
That possibility exists. That possibility exists, but whether that possibility exists or not, there's still the mission that has to be completed. This mission is to bring democracy to Ethiopia, the kind of democracy that we have in South Africa, the kind of democracy that we have in Botswana and in Ghana and in many African countries. We need to bring that kind of democracy to Ethiopia. So until that's completed, until that we're able to do that, I'll be there speaking through nonviolent means, pressing for democracy.
Now, there's a new government in place in Ethiopia. What have you seen? Have there been any reforms, or what do you expect should be the #1 reform?
Well, we're cautiously optimistic about the change. We're cautiously optimistic about the new prime minister. This is the catchphrase. This is the most popular way to describe the present situation in the country. Now, what do we mean by cautiously optimistic? The prime minister is saying the right things. Now, this is very different than the time we had during Mellis's time. Mellis enjoyed annoying the public, going against the public opinion. But now we have a prime minister who looks as if though he cares what the public thinks, who cares about public opinion. And that's a change, that's a welcome change. But that's not enough, because people have demanded change. They want to see real change on the ground. Now, what needs to be done to this end? What must he do to bring real change on the ground? He needs to do 2 things. First, he needs to lift the state of emergency. And then he needs to call for an all-inclusive dialogue. What do we mean by an all-inclusive dialogue? An all-inclusive dialogue between a dialogue between the APRDF and all political parties, including those who have been branded as terrorist organizations.
I gotta ask a question, because critics have said that journalists in Ethiopia are all divided into 2. They're either with the government or the opposition, that there is no objectivity. Is this a fair criticism?
I think we're all in the same boat, because unless there's democracy, it's not possible to practice journalism. We don't have choice. We have been forced to engage in activism for human rights and democracy because we have been entangled in the events. We have been victims of oppression. I spent 6.5 years in prison. So this, the question of democracy is not an abstract thing for me. It's something concrete. So, I think all journalists are in the same boat. We all have to, call for democracy, and we have to be activists for democracy until until we have democracy, the enabling environment that would allow us to practice journalism.
Eskinder, thank you so much. You are a story of courage for press freedom and for political freedom and humanity in Ethiopia and the whole of Africa. Thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you for having me.
Eskinder Nega is an Ethiopian journalist and a blogger.